New York is making moves to bring nuclear power to the state. While the measure certainly has its supporters, we're going to hear from environmental experts on their concerns. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray.
And I'm Jamie DeLine. Governor Kathy Hochul announcing plans to bring new nuclear power plant to upstate New York.
Some lawmakers responding, saying that they want the plant to be located in their districts.
I caught up with the Assembly Minority Leader to get his reaction. Take a look. Assembly Minority Leader Will Barkley represents Oswego County, which is already home to 3 nuclear reactors. He believes it would be the perfect spot to continue to expand New York's nuclear power infrastructure.
I'm going to do everything to advocate that it be located in Oswego County. I think it's an ideal location for a new plant.
He says it checks off all the boxes needed in order to be considered as a candidate location, including community support.
So we have a strong workforce. We know what we're doing. Land, obviously, got to be near water. So we have all those. I think there's 1,600 acres at the facilities that are adjoined currently now. So there's plenty of space for it. And I think the demand was one, too. And with Micron coming to central New York, our electricity demand is going to go through the roof.
While a site has yet to be chosen, places in upstate New York are being considered. According to Governor Hochul, a new zero-emission nuclear facility would bring 1,600 construction jobs and 1,200 permanent jobs. Barkley says a new nuclear power facility would be beneficial for the state's energy grid.
When you have a nuke plant, you know you can generate electricity 24/7, and it's always going to be dependable.
Blair Horner with New York Public Interest Group wants a process to be transparent and include public involvement.
There needs to be an independent analysis as to what are the costs to the state, not only directly to the cost to ratepayers and taxpayers, but also the costs of not spending money somewhere else.
According to the New York Power Authority, the announcement was about a year in the making. When it comes to when the project will be completed, that remains unclear. I'm told there will be a better estimate once they work through the location and feasibility phases for the facility.
Joining us now to give additional insight on New York State's push for nuclear power, Alex Beecham. He is the Northern Regional Director for the Food and Water Watch. That's a climate advocacy group. Alex, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
I'm going to guess, and you should never guess when you're a journalist, but if based on who you represent, I'm guessing you're not crazy about this news that nuclear power might be making a comeback.
Yeah, that guess is right. We're deeply upset at Food and Water Watch about Governor Hochul's really reckless embrace of nuclear power. And for us, it's because this is dirty energy, it's dangerous, it's wildly expensive, but also it's going to take forever, right? I think the timelines that the governor's putting out really underline just how far in the future she thinks this stuff will actually be built. And to me, that really underlines that this just isn't a solution for any near-term grid challenge at all. We're talking about building this stuff way out in 2040 at the earliest. So to me, it's just chasing a false solution when we ought to be focusing on building renewable energy.
When I saw the announcement, I was surprised because I'm wait, Kathy Hochul's pushing for this, and then I looked at how they worded how they wanted to get this, and what jumped out at me, they want a new zero-emission advanced nuclear power plant that would generate 1 gigawatt of power, enough to power 1 million homes. We can dive into the second part of that first, but new, cleaner, safer. It sounds like they're saying this isn't the nuclear power that your parents or grandparents had. Is that fair, that this is cleaner and better, or no?
No, it's based on nothing, really. So, there's a lot of hype right now around nuclear power, not just in New York, but around the country. The reality is this is the same old nuclear power. They're basically just talking about smaller reactors. So I think what the state seems to be hinting at is they could get to 1 gigawatt of power by building several smaller reactors, right? So instead of one giant reactor, maybe you build 4 or 5, maybe you locate them at the same site. None of that stuff is really figured out yet, but making this smaller doesn't make it any safer. This is the same old technology we've been using for years. There's just new hype and new messaging around it, but we're talking about essentially the same thing.
And what makes it, we haven't had a nuclear disaster in some time. What makes it, what's your big concern about the danger of it? Because I'm assuming the other side would argue it's gotten safer, Alex. We know what we're doing. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's still a risk of a nuclear accident. That's kind of the doomsday scenario. But for us, it's not just that, right? So at Food and Water Watch, we fought very recently, just a couple of years ago, a proposal to dump a bunch of radioactive water into the Hudson River as part of the Indian Point decommissioning. So to me, that points at just how dirty this stuff is. This is the very end of the life cycle, and we're still having to fight, had to pass a bill into law and then eventually get Kathy Hochul to sign it, just to stop dumping radioactive water in the Hudson River. So they still have no idea what to do with the waste. They've never known the entire life of nuclear power. And we still don't, right? And we don't even at the very end once the plant is decommissioned. So building more of this stuff is just going to make that nuclear waste problem worse. But also, I think the other thing we're really concerned about is the ratepayer impact. This is the single most expensive way we have in the country or in the world to produce electricity. So I think it's ironic that a governor who certainly talks a lot about affordability, if not actually doing things to make New York more affordable, but all of that rhetoric, and then now he or she is embracing the most expensive way to produce electricity. And we know who's going to pay for it. It's all of us. It's the ratepayers.
Do you have any inkling why the about face on nuclear power from again, someone with a big D in front of her name, a Democrat? Is it politics, do you think, or is it also just need where there's a reality that we can't sustain the power grid unless we come up with something, and some believe that, wind turbines and solar, just there's not enough space or enough of that to offset what we need. How do you react to that of it?
Yeah, I don't know really what's made Hochul embrace nuclear power over the last year or so. I mean, I think it's clearly connected to wooing Micron, at least in part. I think that in my mind, those things are connected. And at the press conference last week, she talked about grid reliability, but she talked a lot more about manufacturing. So I don't think this is actually about stabilizing the grid. I think it's about wooing manufacturers to New York. To me, that's a misguided thought as well. But it seems like that's what's driving it from her end. But I honestly don't know. And she doesn't have a deep history of either rejecting or embracing nuclear power. So I don't know if it's an about face per se. I think it's more a troubling trend of her getting worse on climate change and worse on energy issues over the last 2 years. And that's, I think, really, really problematic. I guess the other thing I'd say is, the state is failing to hit our renewable goals. That's Kathy Hochul and her administration's fault, and frankly, the fault of the last administration as well. So, this is a thing to kind of distract, to sort of like chase this shiny object. Maybe nuclear power will save us. The reality is it won't, even if we build it at the scale she's proposing. But it's a way to talk about that instead of talking about the state's real lack of growth in renewables, which is what we need to be investing in and what NYPA should be investing in right now.
Last 30 seconds and last question. You must do a lot of lobbying, or you have people who do it with you. Does she have the votes in Albany to get this done? I mean, she's not king. She can't just wave a wand and say build a plant. I'm assuming that the state's going to have to help in some way. Lawmakers are going to have a voice in this. Where's everybody else in this? Do you have any idea?
It's a good question. I don't think she has lawmakers lined up. I thought Senator Krueger's statement last week was really important. She's a very powerful senator and really, really against this stuff. So that was heartening to see. But more importantly, I just think New Yorkers aren't going to accept this. So whether or not she needs the legislature, I think there is a growing resistance to this, and she's going to feel it over the course of the summer and the fall. And I'm hopeful we can still win this fight, because people are going to get more and more upset as they understand that this is a real possibility.
All right, Alex Beecham, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for coming on. Give us your position on this.
Yeah, thanks again.
We do appreciate it. Speaking of New York lawmakers, they're reacting to the federal cuts to the health care spending. But what steps has the state taken to improve public health? We're going to hear from the Empire Center on the impacts from the most recent session. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. Federal budget cuts to health care spending could have an impact here in New York State, according to the governor.
Governor Hochul reacting to the federal cuts, saying that they will impact state hospitals and health systems.
These cuts are coming as part of the President Trump's tax cut and spending plan, nicknamed the Big Beautiful Bill. According to analysis from Greater New York Hospital Association, the cuts will total some $8 billion to New York's hospitals and the health system.
In a statement from the governor, she claims that the hospital cuts will lead to 34,000 jobs lost, as well as more deaths that could have been prevented.
Joining us now to give additional insight this past legislative session, Bill Hammond. He's the Senior Fellow for Health Policy at the Empire Center. Bill, thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure to be
For
here.
those who don't know what Empire Center is, it's different than Empire. There's a lot of empires in their titles. What is the Empire Center about?
Oh, it's a nonprofit think tank, nonpartisan. We have kind of a fiscally conservative, free markets, pro liberty kind of bent to us. But we do policy analysis. My main area of specialization is healthcare, but we also do a lot of tax policy, education, energy, other big policy areas.
Gotcha.
So looking back at this past legislative session, what really stood out to you?
Well, it was a year of spending a lot of money. It was a friend of mine, E.J. McMahon, the founder of the Empire Center. He did an analysis and he found that this budget increases spending by the largest percentage in 40 years. That's after making some adjustments for some budgetary gains that they made and also adjusting for inflation. But yeah, it was a $260 billion budget. And that was a 7% increase, so roughly twice inflation. That's kind of the overarching spending number that includes federal aid. But if you zero in just on the state share of it, it's up 11%. And that's the part that was the highest in 40 years. I mean, this was done in the absence of any kind of particular economic crisis or anything. It was just a lot of inertia, a lot of, wanting to spend money.
Mm-hmm. You specialize in health with some healthcare issues that jumped out to you where money was spent and that might be good in a way, or?
Well, a lot of that new money went to the Medicaid program. So Medicaid was up, what did I find? The state's spending $45 billion this year. That's a $6 billion increase, 16%
That's
increase.
a huge jump.
16% in 1 year on top of what's already a very well-funded Medicaid program.
Now, do you think that the state should have done more to fund Medicaid, Medicare, anything like that?
Well, I think so. If you've been paying attention to the news out of Washington,
Yeah.
Congress is on the brink of a huge budget bill that includes big tax cuts, but also big changes to Medicaid. Changes to Medicaid that are going to cost New York billions of dollars going forward. And the governor and the legislature deplored that and said it's a horrible bill, it's going to devastate our healthcare industry, but they didn't do anything to prepare for it, or they did very little to prepare for it. And if you know that you're going to lose federal aid in the next year or two, which it does look like that's going to happen, it seems to me you would want to tighten your belt
Right.
to get ready to make sure the program is running as lean as possible so that you can survive when you lose some of that federal funding. They went the opposite direction. This was it was kind of a blowout year for spending on Medicaid.
Bill, a lot of talk about the cuts. Republicans say it's really more just tightening things up, getting rid of fraud. In fact, Letitia James just had a case this week where she talked about some transport company was cheating Medicaid money, allegedly. Two things can be true at once, right? Cuts might be coming, but there might be room for to tighten up the who's getting Medicaid and why and the fraud, right?
I think part of the problem with there's like a semantic thing going on. Even after this bill passes, chances are that Medicaid spending will continue going up. It'll just go up at a slower rate. You can pull hundreds of billions of dollars out of Medicaid over a 10-year period and still spend more on it. But in order to get those savings, they're definitely doing things that will affect how many people get benefits. And that can be discussed as a cut. The biggest example is they're imposing what they call a community engagement requirement, a work requirement. So in order to continue receiving Medicaid, able-bodied adults would have to show that they're doing at least 80 hours of employment or education or something in that vein, volunteer work. That will require a lot of reporting, and there's some concern that even if someone is doing the 80 hours, they won't accurately report it to the state and they'll be cut off of benefits as a result of that. And in fact, they're anticipating that millions of people will lose Medicaid as a result of that policy. But there is also some attempt to tighten the program, to squeeze out fraud. One of the big things they're doing is they're cracking down on provider taxes, which are kind of a gimmick that states use to squeeze extra federal funding. New York is one of the states that has done that. In fact, they just this year enacted a new provider tax, which now it turns out they're not going to be able to get the money they were expecting. They're going to lose about half of the money they were expecting from that tax.
Okay.
Now, let's say this federal bill does pass. I know state leaders were saying, like, oh, we can't backfill everything, if we don't get money from the federal government as much as we usually do. Do you think that they'll come back for a special session if this bill passes?
They're talking about doing that. These cuts are not going to all take effect right away. Some of them are kind of phased in, and a lot of them don't start until next year or the year after that. Whether they have to come back is kind of an open question. But I think some of their the alarm that they're raising about this is exaggerated. New York's Medicaid spending has skyrocketed in the last few years under Governor Hochul. And so even if you extract billions of dollars out of New York's funding, it'll still have a lot of money. It'll still have as much money as it had 2 years or 3 years ago. And the Medicaid program was cooking along pretty well 2 years and 3 years ago. So it's not clear to me that this will be quite the disaster financially that the state is claiming. There's going to be, especially immigrants are going to lose their coverage as a result of this, and not just traditionally described illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants, but also people who are here legally, so people with green cards who haven't been here 5 years yet, people who arrived as children and were recognized under the DACA program, bona fide refugees who are here. Those people are going to lose their access to health insurance. And if they're low income, it's going to be very hard for them to afford to buy an alternate plan.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Bill Hammond, Empire Center, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
We do appreciate it. Oh, it's the story that rocked the political landscape down in New York City. Zohran Mamdani, Democrat challenger now in the city's mayoral race. When we come back, a closer look at the areas Mamdani is seeing support, and we'll also hear from those looking closer at the other candidates that are going to be on that ballot.
If you have a comment or story idea, let us know. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN.
Welcome back. New York politics getting rocked in New York City. Little-known assembly member Zohran Mamdani beating out the former governor Andrew Cuomo to secure the Democratic nomination in the race for mayor.
Here's reporter Henry Rossoff with Pix 11 in the city with more.
Here in Bensonhurst and neighboring Bath Beach, Zohran Mamdani made some serious inroads. And bear in mind, these are parts of South Brooklyn growing increasingly conservative with a lot of supporters of President Trump.
I think he's going to be a good mayor. I think he's going to be an honest guy.
It was easy enough to find neighbors here in Bensonhurst supportive of Zohran Mamdani.
If he's for the people, then he's for the people.
This is just one of several areas around the city where the 33-year-old Democratic Socialist told me he was a little surprised to see so much support.
We have gone far beyond the neighborhoods you'd consider just to be progressive. We have won in the very neighborhoods that Donald Trump won in. We're speaking about Bath Beach, we're speaking about Bensonhurst, we're speaking about College Point, and ultimately this coalition is one that also looks similar to Eric Adams's in 2021.
Not so fast, says Mayor Eric Adams, who joined this week's episode of Picks on Politics after announcing an independent run for re-election.
And we all know that the Democratic primary is really a large number of the left-leaning part of the party. So you still have about 2 million Democrats that did not vote, 1 million independents that did not vote.
But it may be a tough road for Adams, with sources confirming that former Governor Andrew Cuomo will also have an independent line on the November ballot, though it's not yet clear if he will actively campaign after losing the Democratic primary to Mamdani. And back in Bensonhurst, there are still plenty of people like Robert Thompson, a supporter of President Trump, who says he's just not sure why some of his neighbors like Mamdani, especially when it comes to keeping the city safe.
You could have more crime. You could have more death. I mean, come on. Any reasonable person, smart person knows that.
And Mamdani has already begun consolidating a lot of the support that went to former Governor Cuomo during the primary phase. He picked up key endorsements during the back end of this week from hotel workers, their union, from the nurses union, and from service workers. In Bensonhurst, Henry Ralston, Pix 11 News.
Stick around, back with a look at the week ahead in just a bit.
If you have a comment or story idea, let us know. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X at WTEN.
Finally, in Empire State Weekly, we are continuing to follow the impacts of President Trump's tax and spending plan, known as the Big Beautiful Bill, as it makes its way through the Senate and the House. What will that measure do, and how will it impact legislation here in New York State?
As a part of the debate process, lawmakers removed a measure that would have banned states from doing anything to regulate artificial intelligence. This will seemingly allow New York's AI regulations to continue to progress next session.
We'll be sure to keep an eye on this AI legislation and the other federal developments that could impact New York State, and of course, we'll bring you analysis. For now, from all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray.
And I'm Jamie DeLine. We'll see you here next week.
And don't you forget, you can watch this show all over New York State. Here's the full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 television stations across the great state of New York.